How to design a market research and what is a market research? So let's go through what is a market research first, and then how to design a market research. Now, there is a difference between market research and marketing research. Market research is mainly about the marketing environment and can be executed through secondary data, which is information published around the environment of the market, political, economic, sociocultural, technological elements, legal elements of the market, and the environmental rules and regulations and situation. In addition to a study of the industry itself. So we will talk about this in a future video. But today we're focusing on the decision making in marketing. So the research that enables that decision making in marketing. And this is a process that enables a strategic and influential marketing decision making. Informed decisions are always better than and more effective than uninformed decisions. And the quality of a marketing or a management decision depends really on the quality of the information that you have and the understanding of the situation and the context and the market, etc. So it is a systematic process that identifies the information required to address a specific question that you have as a business. It could be about opportunity in the market, whether it exists or not, a gap in the market, whether it exists or not, or it could be about a problem, an issue you have, a reduction in sales. Is it because of change in the price or because of a reduction in the disposable income of those customers in the market? What is the situation? Where that is coming from? Evaluation of whether the advertising campaign was effective or not, etc. So a specific question that you have in mind, and then you design around that based on the information you need to collect and the type of information you need to collect. The research design in terms of what type of data, how these data will be collected, what sort of analysis, and then you implement all of that, and of course report back in the way that the management team or the readers, the audiences of that report will be interested to receive the information. Usually it's sharp, to the point, very clear, and meaningful to them. It is relevant to the decisions that they are making. Now this, because it's a systematic process, it follows specific steps in a specific order. Of course, you go backwards and forward between these steps to adapt and change and develop based on the realities around you and the results that you get from each process. So it's not set by stone. When you design it, you could update, and you need to be dynamic and flexible enough to do that. But as we said earlier, we start with setting what is the problem. So the problem statement, or the issue, the aim, the purpose of the research. What are we trying to find out or achieve or understand? And from that statement of the problem, you develop your objectives, research objectives, and research question. So what question are we answering? And that's very important to enable specific objectives to generate from that. And decide the research plan through the design we talked about, and we will mention that in more details. what is the approach of the research type of data, and the design, the data collection methods, and what type of data is it, how we do the analysis. And then we do what we call field work, which is collecting the data and then analyzing these data and interpreting it, turning the data into knowledge. And that's really important. So how you turn the data into knowledge based on its relevance to the situation and the research question. And that's really significant, and see the connection, the relationships between different variables and different informations. So that's really important. And then, of course, writing the report. So it seems logical, quite common sense, really. And it applies to any business research and even other outside the business field and the marketing field research. The process is usually quite the same. So the most vital element of the process, the key to start with, is the problem statement. So what is the management problem we're trying to solve, or what is the opportunity we are trying to identify and evaluate? Which campaign are we evaluating and why? What results we aimed from it, etc. So that clarity. Now, usually those that have the problem have their own assumptions, and they will try to influence the researcher with that, subconsciously, because that's what's on their mind. So when you are, as a researcher, whether you're internal or external researcher from an agency, considering with the client or with the manager whose the problem is theirs, or the aspiration for an opportunity is theirs, is to ask further questions and re-ask differently until you really recover and release the maybe embedding problems or causes, or areas of study that are needed to answer the question. Or maybe the question is wrong. Maybe that's not the right question to ask. So that is really significant. This stage is important, and questioning things is required here to be able to, as a researcher, objectively analyze the situation. So you don't come up with results that are leading and misleading, and will end up with worse decisions than a decision without this information. So be quite careful with that. Sub-questions, and we have examples here for you to consider. Until you have clarity, and then you come up with your objectives and the proposal. So the proposal is significant here, because the proposal then bring the plan together and highlight what's needed. And usually it's needed to be able to sell the idea of the research and to gain the funding and the resources and human resources and the financial resources that you need to do it, the time that is needed to do it properly, etc. Access to information. So you start with a background, so why this research came about. You explain the problem statement and the benefits from that, and then talk about the objectives now that you identified, which need to be very specific, measurable, so you can prove later on that the research achieved these objectives through the findings. And then design that research. So what is the suitable design for this research? And this means the approach of the research, the type of data. Is it to explore something? Is it to you have a specific variables you're examining, so you want more descriptive research, as we will see in a minute, and or it is very specific, just two variables, cause and effect, and there is a clarity of cause and effect, so you do an experiment, for example. That will influence then what type of analysis you have for qualitative text-based data or quantitative numerical-based data. And of course, the time needed for it, the cost, the budget, the resources, the specialists, whether in conducting interviews, in running a survey, in translating more than one person to do the analysis separately, so you reduce subjectivity, etc. All of that is needed, and you might reference this to show engagement with previous studies and get credibility on the methodology, that it is proven accurate, especially if this is an academic research. References will be very, very helpful. And of course, then you have executive summary that summarizes the whole thing for those who don't need to read the details, but the summary will be a very good indicative for them on the importance of the research. Now, such a proposal is not academic. Academic proposals will need involvement with the literature also. So what has been said about that topic and which theory underpins such a research. This is really what you give the agency who's conducting the research for you in business and marketing, or the internal research staff developing this to gain the budget. So it's between the management who has the problem and those who are completing the research and conducting it. So to go into details into the market research, we need to start, as we said, with formulating the problem. So from the decision problem that the managers would have into the research problem, and this is really important, the difference between the two. For example, as a management problem, it is the sales are reducing and we need to decide what to do to increase the sales again. So the research problem would be, okay, so what are the reasons behind the change in sales number in comparison with the same period in previous years? And that means management thought maybe it's because of the quality changes, because they changed their outsourcing manufacturer. But as a researcher, then you explore this further. There might be price changes, there might be inflation, there might be increase in unemployment, reduction in income and disposable income. There might be change in market trend, there might be change in consumer behavior due to new technologies or different weather or work environment. So there could be a lot of reasons, and that is, as a researcher, you need to examine. At the end of exploring it, you might end up with the same quality and maybe price, but you might end up with more. So it depends on what you identify, and then the decision will be much different. So a comprehensive objective approach rather than built on assumptions. And then we look into determining the design. So there are three research designs in marketing: exploratory research, which is when we don't know much about the problem. So we look into the market and conduct maybe secondary data research. And secondary data is data has been published by other sources who conducted research for other purposes. And maybe qualitative interviews, for example, with experts, unstructured or semi-structured, with few questions, and letting them run with it to just tell us all that they know about. They are familiar with the situation, so they would tell us their experience about it. And then we can deduct from that some knowledge and some variables that then, with knowing more and having variables, or we already know about it, so we know what variables involved, we could go with what we call descriptive research. So with descriptive research or causal research, and this is the third one, which is cause and effect. Now, the causal research will be limited variables affecting each other, mainly cause and effect, like, for example, increase or decrease in the prices influence the amount of sales with a product that its target market are price sensitive. So we can conduct such research in an experiment, controlling every other variable, and experimenting to understand to what extent the price changes will influence the sales. Now, whatever we do here, it's a primary data we are collecting. So it's a primary research for the purpose of our solving our business problem or identifying opportunities, whatever the issue that we identified. It hasn't been done before, and it is for the sole purpose of solving our problem, and it's from the sample of the population we want to study. It could be quantitative and it could be qualitative, but it is quite common to be quantitative because then we have specific variables, so we can create what we call a survey based on a questionnaire of list of questions that are very structured with potential answers to select from, so we can identify, code it later with numbers that enable us to do statistic analysis. So it's numerical based. Now, of course, if it is qualitative, then we do observation. Observations could be structured also and coded numerically, or it could be semi-structured, and then it's just text-based, qualitative, requiring qualitative analysis. We could have open-ended questions for interviews or observations, or what we call focus group, which is a group interviews with discussion, or closed questions that we mostly use in surveys. Now, who's conducting, who's responding? This is really important to select carefully. So the population of our market or target market, looking for a representative sample of that market. Now, sometimes we end up with convenient sample because of limitations in terms of time, access, but they should have similar criteria that makes them relevant. So identify these criteria that make them relevant. It could be purposeful sampling. So we need only to speak with the customers who changed their buying behavior of this product to find out whether that was based on a price related decision or quality or other factors. So we take the sample purposefully from those customers who changed the amount of buying or the timing of buying, or which model they are buying, etc. from us, or those who exited the business, of course. It could be random sampling, but from that population. It could be, you could depend on snowballing. So you start with someone from the target market, and then they lead you to other people who have interesting experiences buying from you, and then you interview them. So depends on your population, really. So who and how you select your sample, and how many. So how big the sample is. If you're doing descriptive with quantitative data, a survey, then you need at least more than 30 for a tiny study to be statistically relevant and viable to conduct research on and analysis on. But usually you need way bigger number to have really representative and meaningful results statistically. Qualitative research, you will end up with a smaller sample because you're looking for the why and the motives behind things and the what questions. So with this one, you conduct lengthy in-depth interviews maybe, or shorter interviews, but focus groups, and you get a lot of rich information from them telling the story and telling the feelings, and then you conduct very different analysis on that. So that will be a smaller sample. It's also the size of the sample impacted by your resources and the time available. So all of that, but in general, you need to balance it to be meaningful, to give you sufficient viable results that will be useful for your to answer the question and to make good decisions. Because at the end of the day, it's all about making better and more informed decisions, more effective for the business. Now you need to look into errors in the data collection, potential limitations, and identify to what extent it's valid, the data that gonna come from that sample. So this means if you conduct the same research again with the same people, you will get the same results, and reliable. Or if it is repeated, that you will not get a contradicting results from it over time. So that's important, but of course considering any other changes. So there are specific ways to identify and calculate the validity and reliability of the research, of course, but that is for a different conversation. Now, then you have the analysis and interpretation of the data. And with that comes whether it's thematic analysis, for example, that for the qualitative data, that you identify specific themes that coming out of the data, and after coding and categorizing, or it could be a narrative that coming out of the data, the qualitative data that telling you a specific story that you can build a decision on, or it could be a content analysis, for example, that you look into the texts, the frequently of specific words mentioned, the context of mentioning them, what that means to answering your questions, etc. There are different ways to analyze qualitative data. There are systems and softwares to help with that. And now AI also helps with data analysis, whether qualitative or quantitative. AI, artificial intelligence. So quantitative data, also there are statistical formulas looking at the cross-tabulation, the frequencies. These are the simplest ones. And then you go into more depth into the relationship. It's mainly about the relationship and the links between the variables. But the key here is the interpretation. In any case, you need to try to be objective towards it and not influence it with your own opinion or background. And this is why you need more than one person to do the analysis separately and then compare. That is good practice. With the quantitative, usually it's more objective, but it's less rich in terms of answering questions like why and what and feelings and emotions and what's, because consumers or any of the respondents may not be quite aware of the reasoning. It's the conversation that brings it up and the different answers to different questions that when you cross-reference between them, they reveal new really secrets of a human nature and the complex decision making that we do. As we mentioned, some examples of how we judge value, for example, and in the future how we process information. It is a complicated one. And then of course you need to put this in a way that is so that's editing, coding, tabulation, and identity relation that we talked about, showing the relations between these different variables. And then you have to summarize the whole thing in a way that is easy for the reader to understand the findings, understand the meaning behind them, what they mean in relation to the decision, and make a decision. And that needs to be quick and easy for managers because they have many decisions to make and they can link between the informations. And of course, you would make recommendations based on the comprehensive understanding of what's going on that you develop based on your study. So I hope you find this useful. You can see how you move on between these sections because you need to be flexible and dynamic to update based on the information you're receiving. You might change a bit in the sampling, you might change a bit in the what type of analysis or what sort of questions when you're testing the questions, etc. And until next video.